On December 5, 1945, 5 Navy bombers took off on a routine training flight and never came back. Hours later, a rescue plane sent to search for them also vanished, this time in a fireball witnesses actually saw. 27 men. 0 wreckage ever recovered from the first 5 planes, to this day. Some stories were never meant to be found. Fort Lauderdale, Naval Air Station, Florida, just after 2 p.m. on a clear, ordinary afternoon. 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers lifted off for a routine exercise that every trainee in the squadron had flown before. Navigation problem number 1. The route was a simple triangle. East from the coast to practice bombing runs at a shoal called Hens and Chickens, then north past Grand Bahama Island, then southwest back to base. 14 men in total were aboard, most of them with hundreds of logged hours in the air. Leading them was Lieutenant Charles Taylor, a combat veteran of the Pacific Theater with 2,500 flying hours behind him, one of the most experienced pilots stationed at the base that day. A little over an hour into the flight, Taylor radioed the tower with a problem no one expected from a pilot this experienced. Both of his compasses were behaving strangely, and the islands below him didn't match anything on his charts. He believed he was over the Florida Keys, hundreds of miles from where his instruments and elapsed flight time said he actually was, almost exactly where the flight plan expected him to be, near the Bahamas. Taylor ordered the flight to turn and fly northeast, convinced that heading would bring them home to the mainland. It took them the opposite direction entirely, further out over open ocean, away from every visible trace of land. Radio transmissions grew more strained as the afternoon wore on toward evening. "We cannot be sure where we are," Taylor reported to a tower that could hear him but couldn't get a fix on his position. "We cannot see land." As the sun went down and fuel began running critically low, the transmissions grew fainter and further apart, then stopped entirely. Flight 19 was never heard from again, by anyone, on any frequency. The Navy launched one of the largest search and rescue efforts in its history that same night, hundreds of aircraft and surface ships, eventually combing roughly 300,000 square miles of ocean and coastline over the following days. Among the search planes sent out was a PBM Mariner flying boat, carrying 13 more men. Not long after it took off into the darkness, the crew of a nearby ship watched it explode into a fireball over the water below. Losing 5 planes to the sea in one afternoon was already a tragedy. Losing a 6th to a fireball, in plain view of witnesses, on the very night everyone was out searching for the first 5, that's the moment this story stopped being just an accident and started becoming a legend. The Mariner's loss, unlike the others, was never really a mystery to investigators. That particular aircraft model had a well-documented history of fuel vapor explosions, and its wreckage was located and confirmed almost immediately. Flight 19 was different. Despite a search spanning 5 full days and hundreds of thousands of square miles of relatively shallow, searchable coastal water, not one piece of wreckage from any of the 5 bombers was ever found. The Navy's official board of inquiry pointed to disorientation and fuel exhaustion as the most likely explanation, but its own report admitted it couldn't fully account for why an experienced instructor like Taylor stayed so certain of a position that flatly contradicted his own instruments. Their final ruling, on paper, causes or reasons unknown. Disorientation and fuel exhaustion account for a great deal here. A malfunctioning compass, fading afternoon light, and a stretch of unfamiliar islands could genuinely convince even an experienced pilot that he was somewhere he wasn't. It doesn't fully explain why Taylor never simply followed the setting sun west toward the Florida mainland once his instruments and the terrain below him stopped agreeing with each other. And it doesn't explain the total absence of wreckage. 5 separate aircraft going down in relatively shallow, thoroughly searched coastal waters and recovering absolutely nothing, not even a single piece of floating debris. The outer space radio transmission often quoted in Bermuda Triangle books, pilots supposedly reporting the ocean doesn't look as it should, was fabricated decades later by writers popularizing the legend for a paying audience. It was never actually said by anyone that day. The real transmissions were far more mundane and far more human. A confused, experienced pilot, running out of options, running out of fuel, and running out of time. Some stories were never meant to be found. This one lost 14 men to disorientation, 13 more to a mechanical accident on the same night, and gave the Bermuda Triangle its name in the process. Tell me in the comments. A tragic, explainable accident, or something the total absence of wreckage still can't account for. Subscribe to the Unburied. The Ocean Files continue from here.